Okay, back to Matthew 5:18. For truly I say to you, till the heavens and the earth pass away, not one yod or one tittle will by no means pass from the Torah till all is done. In other words, not the yod, the smallest letter, and literally says not the yod or the kotz of a yod. The kotz of a yod is a little horn that's found at the top of the yod. Okay? Not the smallest letter or the smallest mark of the Torah will be removed or eliminated or cease to be in effect until heaven and earth pass away. So until the age of the Adam ends, not the smallest letter or the smallest mark on that letter will change. The Torah is fully in effect, and we must comply to the instruction of those first 5 books. And we have to understand how to apply them in today's day and age. We don't have the sacrificial system, but each one of those sacrifices represents an aspect of worship that we can read deeper into the Hebrew and understand how we apply that. Okay? Starting with, for example, the burnt offering, the very first offering in Leviticus. The animal is totally consumed. The person that brought it receives nothing. The priest receives nothing. It is a voluntary act of worship that is given with nothing in return, or without the expectation of anything in return. Do I worship? Am I in a relationship with Yahuwah my Elohim without an expectation of having anything given back to me? I love him because I love him. Okay? So, thus, Yahuwah tells you to keep the commandments. The Messiah, Yahusha, also tells you to keep the commandments. The apostles, when we read in the epistles, also tell you to keep the commandments. So why on earth would Paul now come along and tell you not to keep the commandments? It doesn't make any sense. But when we read Galatians in our English text, in our King James Best, that's exactly what we read, because we don't understand what's actually written. We don't understand the Torah. We don't understand the prophets. And Yahusha told the woman at the well, you worship what you don't know. We worship what we don't understand. Why? Because we don't take it upon ourselves to look at it for ourselves. We depend on our doctrines, or the takanot of the rabbis, or whatever our pastor says, or whatever the best-selling book author says, or whatever the televangelist says. They aren't responsible for your relationship with Elohim. You are. Okay? So we must keep the commandments. Okay? If we look at Paul as saying, oh, he comes along and says, no, you can disregard the commandments, we would consider him a false prophet and one who simply didn't understand. Okay? If we don't understand what Paul is saying, we will lose continuity. Okay? The Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, the writings, into the Gospels and into the epistles, all has continuity. Nothing contradicts something else. Okay? Now, something else that we have to understand before we take a look at Galatians is the covenant. Everything has to do with the covenant. Everything in Torah has to do with the covenant. Another way to state that is everything in the Bible deals with our relationship to Yahuwah, who is Elohim. Elohim only has a covenant, though, with the 12 tribes of Israel when we look in the Bible itself. Again, understanding the deeper aspect. The children of Israel are a representation of the Adam as a whole. Okay? In fact, the whole Bible was only written for Israel. Israel was split into two separate kingdoms after the straying off course of King Solomon and after Rehoboam made the wrong choice. It was split into the house of Judah, the southern kingdom, and into the house of Israel, the northern kingdom. Okay? In Exodus 19, the marriage covenant between Elohim and Israel is described. It says, "Now therefore, if you will obey my voice, if you will Shema, if you will perceive, discern, understand, obey, apply, and be content in what I tell you, and keep my covenant, and treasure, guard, preserve our relationship, then you shall be a peculiar treasure to me above all the people, for all the earth is mine." In other words, I am going to use you to reach out to the entire world. I'm going to use you as an example of how the realm of Adam can be restored back to the realm of Elohim. Now therefore, and you shall be unto me a kingdom of Kohanim, and a nation set apart to a specific purpose. Okay, you will be a nation of priests is a pretty poor translation, because we always think of priests as those people that have the little white thing on their collars. Kohanim, you will be a minister. You will be a nation of ministers and teachers to the world. And you will be a holy nation. Ooh, so divine. There's no word for holy in Hebrew. There's no concept of something that is divine in Hebrew. That is a Greco-Roman expression. You will be a nation that is set apart to a particular purpose. You will be Kodesh. And the particular purpose that they will be set apart to is to restore the Adam back to Elohim. Okay? So, these are the words which are spoken to the children of Israel. Okay? Then we go down to Shemot 19:7, and Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all of these words that Yahuwah had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, "Yes, all that Elohim has spoken we will do." And Moses returned the words of the people to Yahuwah. Now let's consider Psalms 105:8. He has remembered his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations. Okay, 1,000 generations. The Aleph, the thousands of generations that love me. Those that adhere to Yahuwah Elohim, as opposed to the third and fourth generation that hate me. The third, the Gimel, those who are puffed up with pride, that move into the fourth, the Dalet, spiritual poverty. Those are the ones that hate him. It isn't until we reach the highest point in our relationship, the Aleph, that we truly love our Elohim. Okay? So when we listen to the commandments and we are in a relationship, we say we are in covenant. We love our Elohim. We have reached the point where our Elohim is present in our lives. We escape from simply saying, I believe in something called God. I begin to recognize the presence of something called Elohim, this mighty power, this force of redemption, deliverance, restoration, that has the authority to heal me, that has the authority to bring me rest, but also has the authority to judge me based on whether or not I choose to walk in his ways, or whether I choose to chatat, to stray off the course of his ways. Okay? Psalm 105:9, which covenant he made with Abraham and his oath unto Isaac. Verse 10, and confirm the same unto Jacob for a statute, and to Israel as an everlasting covenant. Let's consider the children of Israel, B'nai Yisrael. Everyone can say, well, that just applies to the children of Israel in the Old Testament. B'nai Yisrael, B'nai, again from the root bana, that means to restore and to establish. Israel means the prince of Elohim, but also means the authority of Elohim. If I am restored and established by and through the authority of Elohim, then I am B'nai Israel, and this applies to me today. And if it applies to me today, I must, absolutely must, perceive, discern, understand, obey, and apply the word of Elohim to my life and be content. And in doing so, treasure my relationship with my Elohim and do my part to preserve my relationship with Yahuwah, my Elohim. Okay? But Israel broke the covenant and needed to be redeemed. Okay? The house of Israel broke the covenant and needed to be redeemed. The house of Judah, not so much so. They strayed off course, but they maintained a covenant relationship. Okay? The house of Israel disregarded the Torah completely. They said, we don't have to do all that stuff that the southern kingdom is doing. In the 4th century, the bishops under Constantine said, we are no longer responsible for keeping the Torah of the Jews or the feasts and festivals of the Jews. Understand it. It is the Torah of Yahuwah Elohim, and they are the feasts and festivals of Yahuwah Elohim, both of which are commanded that they be kept forever. Okay? So let's look at Jeremiah 31:32. Not like the covenant I made with their father in the day when I strengthened their hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Yahuwah. Israel was the bride. Yahuwah Elohim was the husband. Okay, we look in Hosea and we read that Elohim tells the house of Israel, I am no longer your husband. You are no longer my wife. I divorce you. Okay? Those words are still found in the get in Judaism when a man or divorces a woman. Okay? We also have to understand that once a husband has divorced a wife and she marries another, she can no longer go back to the first husband. The problem is that in Hosea, although he has divorced the wife, the house of Israel, in that same book of prophecy, he also says, although I have divorced you, I will bring you back. He cannot do that. Elohim will not violate his Torah, but there are certain aspects of the Torah that allow for steps to be taken for a divorced wife to come back to the family of that husband. Okay? The husband has to die, then the son can redeem the wife. And we'll get into that here shortly. Okay? Israel was sold into slavery because of transgression. Both the house of Judah and the house of Israel were sold into slavery. First with the Assyrians and with the Babylonians. It might shock everyone to know that Yahushua, Mashiach, came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And here is the shocker. What you call the New Testament was not written to Christians. It was written to the house of Israel. It is an extremely, very, very Jewish document. But we don't get that if we don't understand the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. Okay? Matthew 15:24. But he answered and said, I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So if you are not a descendant of the tribes of Israel, are you not part of the covenant? The answer is also found in the Tanakh, the Old Testament. The group of people that came out of the land of Egypt were a mixed multitude. The Torah applied to both Israel and the stranger who resided among them. Okay? Exodus 12:38, and a mixed multitude went up also with them, and flocks and herds, and very much cattle. Okay? That whole group camped at the foot of Sinai. But to become a part of the covenant, they had to obey the same rules, the Torah. They had to agree to keep and obey, and this was a marriage covenant. The Torah we can consider to be a ketubah. When a man and a woman get married in Judaism, a contract called a ketubah is written up. Both parties sign that contract and have to agree to that contract within the ketubah. The Torah, the Bible, is our ketubah. So the whole group camped at the foot of Sinai. They all had to obey, and from there they were referred to as part of the house of Israel, and no longer were they referred to as a mixed multitude. So what does this have to do with Galatians? Well, everything. Everything. Israel committed adultery. The house of Israel committed adultery. Elohim put her away. He divorced her, and he gave her a bill of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah was not afraid. They also went and played the harlot, but they played the harlot while trying to maintain the covenant. They still sought after Elohim according to the Torah. They still sought a covenant relationship, but they did not do it according to the instructions, and they strayed into paganism as well. But they were willing to come out of paganism, make teshuvah, and come back into a relationship. Okay? Jeremiah 3:8, and I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Okay? So now the house of Israel was no longer Elohim's wife, but he still loved her. This is where the grace, the favor comes into play. The only way back to, or back for the northern kingdom, for the house of Israel, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, was for the payment at the cross. Her debts were paid, and now she could become the wife of Elohim again. That is why Yahusha said he only came for the lost sheep out of the house of Israel. Romans 7, we read all about the law of the divorced woman and how the Messiah made it possible for the wife, Israel, to become a wife again. If you have time, I encourage you to read the book of Romans. And this is where we will pick up in our next study. Until then, I encourage you to read that 7th chapter of Romans. I encourage you to refresh your memory in Chronicles and Kings, the book of Hosea as well. And we will touch back on this next Tuesday. Until then, I love you very much and I miss you. I hope we get together again soon. Goodbye.